837-1112. And we encourage your questions and comments. Now, without further ado, here's your host, L. Nathan Hare.
All right, here we go. Living now, living right now. This is L. Nathan here, your host here for this next hour at WFO Power 96.5 FM on your dial. Our principal sponsor, of course, the Community Action Organization of Western New York, still fighting the war on poverty, now in our 53rd year. I want to welcome all again to this hour of insight, introspection, and interpretation of facts, events, and trends affecting you right here and right now in Buffalo and the Western New York community, and in fact, connect you to communities all across the country. Each week, we focus on things we think will be of interest to you, which will serve to motivate you and serve to connect you to the broader issues that affect our communities here in Western New York. Now, today's program is live, so you can call in and join our discussion. I hope that you will. Our number here again is 837-1112. That's 837-1112. Last week, we began a discussion around the movement towards what I'm referring to as up-credentialing, or credential inflation that has taken hold amongst employers around the country. I'm going to use as sort of the subtext of my discussion an article written by Vic Napier. It was entitled Degree Inflation, Credentialing, and Signaling. Employers Now Demand Overqualification. This was in the Medium Corporation online magazine in June of this year. It's something that's been going on for at least 40 years, but has now become an emerging standard business practice. During a tight labor market where there are many more people looking for work than there are jobs for them to work in, employers can and do pay less and demand more pre-employment education and credentials than they would have asked if the labor market was in reverse, when there were more jobs to fill than there were people to fill those jobs. Initially, this up-credentialing was the response by many business owners to civil rights laws banning job discrimination. Suddenly, jobs that people previously acquired by knowing someone and that they had learned how to do on the job now require 2-year degrees, proven related work experience, good credit history, and tests proving that you were drug-free. In those days, the common complaint was that black and brown people couldn't get a shot at a job unless they knew someone who was already working at that company. For those of you that are older, you remember trying to get a job at places like Ford Motor Company, General Motors, which is now Powertrain, the Saginaw plant, or the American Axle plant over on Delavan, Houdan Industries, J.H. Williams, Republic Steel, Buffalo Forge. You know, those are the companies where between them there's probably 80 or 90,000 jobs, but you couldn't get a shot at those jobs if you didn't know somebody already on the job who could just sort of, bring you in. So now what has occurred is, in response to the demands for fairness in providing employment opportunities, the employers say, well, how do I say I'm being fair? I'm just making a decision based on me, talking to somebody, interviewing somebody, and making a decision about whether or not I want to hire this person. So what did the employers do? They started creating standardized applications and then standardized credentials you had to have in order for you to be able to apply for that job. And of course, once they began to do that, then what it did is it created a way, supposedly, for you to have fairness in terms of who got an opportunity to interview for a job and who ultimately got that job. But it also created it created the possibility that the unions who had control of those shops were finding that the workforce who was already on those jobs was being threatened in terms of who the new people were to come on those jobs. Does that make sense the way I said that? So because you now have supposedly fair standard credentials, if I get my high school diploma and I know some drafting, I know some milling, I know how to use a lathe machine, and so on, then I would be like at the head of the class in terms of who gets a job in those fields. Well, the unions that were already there, the unions aren't there to represent the people who aren't working. right? The union's there to represent the people who are working on the job right now. What was their interest? Their interest was to see to it that the people that they have been helping to get jobs in their companies would continue to be able to get jobs in their companies. And so a collusion, in my view, emerged between the unions and the companies that were hiring these unionized employees, where they sort of established standards that were higher than were necessary to be able to get a job or to be able to do a job at a particular company, and then use those higher standards as a way to sort of cream out, those people who they didn't really want to get onto those jobs. Now, I know that in spite of that union environment, people who knew people were still able to get on jobs. I bowled with guys who were relatively underdeveloped academically. I'm trying to be polite in the way that I'm saying that. Yet, over the course of the 2 or 3 years, this particular guy that I'm talking about, I bowled with him for about 3 years. He had at least 4 jobs over the course of that time period. And these were all jobs that paid really good money, making at that time, 20, 25 bucks an hour, heavy equipment operator, dump truck, driver, jobs like that. And he got these jobs because he knew somebody. He had family members who owned companies or family members who were managers in companies who got him onto those jobs. And he learned the jobs or learned how to do the jobs on the job. So that still is the reality, that people can get jobs because they can get drafted into a company from the people that are there. But for the general public, in order for you to get a job, you've got to do the application. You got to meet certain standards. And what they've been doing is up credentialing or increasing those standards or criteria that you have to meet in order for you to be able to get a particular job. And what that has a tendency to do is those people that have not gone to school enough, haven't gone far enough in school, haven't taken the right courses, they basically get screened out of those jobs. You just got to think about this, right? If you remember what happened with Hurricane Katrina, was that 2006 Hurricane Katrina? You had literally 300,000 people in New Orleans were literally deported to other places of the country. Maybe some were deported in some other country. I don't know. But they definitely had to get out of New Orleans. And then the waters began to recede, and now it was time to do the cleanup and the rebuilding of New Orleans. Did they hire the people that had been living in New Orleans all this time? They had 90,000 unemployed black men who were deported out of New Orleans because of the devastation. And I don't think more than one, maybe 2 of those African men got a job in New Orleans doing the cleanup. They hired people from Italy. They hired people from Mexico, from Guatemala. They hired people from all over the place to come in to do the cleanup work. How smart do you have to be to clean up the mud? I mean, what are you doing to do the cleanup? You got a hose. You're hosing down stuff. You send moles through the sewer lines to push out the gunk and push it out someplace else, out into the water someplace, and then you're gonna wash every building down and send that stuff into the sewer lines. How smart you got to be able to do that? To operate a broom, right? You can't tell me that there's a course that you take called taking cars out of trees. There's no course like that, right? You don't just learn that on the job. You have to figure that out on the job, right? How do you get the cars out of the trees? How do you get the furniture, out of the trees and whatnot? So my point is that any able-bodied, strong person who can take working outside in tough environments where there's mosquitoes and water and muck and dirt and so on, anybody who has that ability, who can follow instructions, could have done 80% of the jobs that occurred during the course of the cleanup following that storm. How come they didn't hire the people that lived there? How come they weren't getting the $60. I mean, I had a child that lived across the street from me. A Yurugu child lived across the street from me. And this child, 18 years old, friend of, of one of my kids, and he went down there and got a job as one of the cleanup people. He lives in Buffalo. He went all the way at 18, went all the way to New Orleans, only lasted 3 months on the job because he fell out of a tree and broke his leg. No disrespect to Peter. He's my dude and whatnot, but he broke his leg. He made about $9,000 over the course of that time period, over a 3-month period, okay? Now, Peter just finished high school and barely finished high school, right? But he made $9,000 doing that. So it's not like you had to be terribly educated to be able to do this cleanup work. There was lots of work for people that didn't know anything to be able to do something. If, like I said, if you were physically strong enough for you to be able to do whatever pulling and pushing and lifting and towing and tugging, and if you were able to do that, if you can work in water and work in with mosquitoes and all of that kind of stuff, you could do that work. Well, Peter could do that. He was an athletic child, right? He could do that, right? But how come Peter got that job and the people who lived in New Orleans didn't get that job? That's the point that I'm trying to get to, right? So this is what I mean by up-credentialing, see, because you had to apply for those jobs. So who wound up getting these jobs? Whatever they said on paper that you had to be in order for you to get those jobs, that can't be true if they were hiring people from Italy, to come down here as temporary workers and whatnot. That can't be true. This up-credentialing is nothing but a strategy that people came up with to enable them to screen people out of opportunities. That's my opinion. Don't write that down as a fact. That's Nate Hare's opinion. My point is that tens of thousands of people, mostly people of color, were denied even being considered for a job due to these increased credentials. In addition, quietly, American companies have shifted the expense of education onto the employees, like retirement benefits and or retirement planning and savings and healthcare costs. Employees are now largely responsible for financing their job-related education. Education costs are one of the fringe benefits that have disappeared from the industrial economy. Companies used to train their workforce on the job. Now, with rampant up-credentialing, governments have bought in to the idea that the public should train workers for the employers, and then let the employers pick from the groups of people that get trained who they want to bring onto their jobs. That training led to certifications. The certifications led to degree requirements, and so we're basically, credentialing people out of the job market. I talk and I'm here with Emmanuel Radford, who does the live streaming of the program. And if I didn't say it before, if you have a handheld device or a computer, you can type in Facebook in your the field on your search engine, and then type in Living Now. The program will come up, and you can type in your questions, your observations, or your concerns, and we'll respond to them on the air. And one of the things that I think I lost my train of thought there, that we have talked about, on-the-job training apprenticeships and learning how to do a new job have become virtually outdated. Now they have something that they call onboarding. This the new terminology now. They call it onboarding of new employees, with the expectation that the new employee must be productive on the job on day one. So in the old days, you just had to prove that you were somebody who could be taught how to do a job. You had enough, preparation that you could be taught how to do a job. Then we would teach you how to do the job on the job, while you're working. That's not the new game now. Now you have to not only have the credentials for the job, you got to demonstrate that you actually have the ability to do the job right now. Then we'll hire you, right? So supposedly it's supposed to lower the unproductive time, where you hire an employee and it takes 3 to 6 months to get that employee really up to speed before you start getting the employees making more money for you than it's costing you to have that employee. So now they want to have the employee completely up to speed before they start the job. However, in looking at this report in Medium Corporation, I was telling you about earlier, the two researchers that were doing the work in this report point to what they refer to as the bachelor degree being a signaling device, that it may not confer specific technical skills needed to perform a job, but it implies that the holder of the bachelor's degree has certain characteristics. Employers can infer race, they can infer social class, they can infer cultural values by the bachelor degree that you acquired, and not be concerned with charges of racism or elitism. In other words, you can look at somebody's name, you can look at the street address that person lives at. You can look at what courses the person took on their transcript. You were taking African history and African poetry and good years in African life. That all seems good until you go to apply for a job. You look at your transcript and say, even if we're wrong, we're still not going to go with this this person. It's a way that they screen you, right? There are commercials that you may hear on this or other stations where people talk about using this website for identifying where jobs are, or to identify employers. And as they talk about identifying employers, they say, we allow you to establish these credentials, and then you can figure out what the questions are that you need to ask the employee, or pre-screen the employee, so that you only end up looking at the employees who are what you actually are looking for. Of course, a few black and brown people are going to get through the screening process anyway, but they minimize that. Okay, employers are actually, in reality, employers are actually hurting themselves in their efforts to screen people of color away from job opportunities. Academic studies on the relationship between people holding a bachelor's degree and productivity have been inconclusive. However, recent studies have shown that up-credentialing and using education as a signaling device actually cost employers more money than it gains for them. Adding unnecessary requirements makes it more difficult and more time-consuming to find candidates whose knowledge, skills, and abilities meet the inflated requirements of employers. So in the Medium Corporation report that I was referring to, there was a study indicating that if you're talking about an IT, information technology, help desk position, requiring a college degree may take 40% more time to fill that position than the same position that didn't require a college degree. In other words, you could be a help desk, technician, and it may cost you $1.40 if you ask for a degree. It may cost you $1.40 for you to hire that person with a degree. I'm not talking about what you pay the person. I'm just talking about the cost of doing the recruiting to identify that person. If you don't put the degree requirement on there, it'll cost you $1 rather than $1.40, right? But you get the same work. You get the exact same work from the person, whether they had the degree or not, because the degree is fake. It's not that it's Donald Trump's fake news. It's the fake degree, right? It's a requirement that's being placed on the employee to be able to qualify to even get an interview for a job, even though having that requirement doesn't have anything to do with the job that you're going to work. So I give this example. You all have heard me talk about this. Most of the things I tell you come out of my own past, right? That I was 18 years old. I was working at William Hanger's company. I saw a classified ad in the Courier Express for a computer operator. And the credential said, high school diploma, no experience necessary. I had a high school diploma and didn't even know what a computer was. You couldn't be more inexperienced than I was. I went down and applied for that job based on meeting the requirements in the newspaper ad, right? And then when I get there, I get into a good conversation with the guy who was doing the hiring. I guess he liked me because we both went to Catholic high schools. And he starts walking me around the company. When I go to the place where this job was going to actually be done, it wasn't a computer operator job at all. It was a sorting machine operator. So in banks, they have those codes, on the bottom of the check, those black codes on the bottom of the check, account code and the bank code and so on. And so what this machine does is it read those codes and then it sorted the checks so that if this was a at this time, Marine Midland, if it was a non-Marine Midland, bank, or it was another bank, it would sort the checks into what bank they belong to. Then it would sort the checks in terms of what account for that bank that the check belonged to. And so what I found is that the sorting machine was attached to the computer, but you didn't have to know anything about the computer to run the sorting machine, right? That's what I mean by up credentialing. See, so people can ask you for credentials, and yet the credentials have nothing to do with what you have to actually know to be able to do the job. This is basically a hustle. It's a way for people to screen people away from jobs. Should we take our first break and then take we're going to take that call first? All right, let's take that call right now. Hi, caller, are you there?
Nathan, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Very good. I just wanted to share this with you. I listen to the financial shows from time to time, and what I heard is that the companies are basically going to get greedy, and they're just going to cut humanity out of the workforce, such as autonomous vehicles.
We'll automate.
Driverless vehicles.
Right.
That will run between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. Or as you see, you go up and you try to cash out in line, and there's no cashier except for one. You'll get 4 cash registers on the computer and just one person monitoring it. And that means that the workforce is going to get a lot worse because competition for jobs are going to become much tighter. Mm-hmm. And I just thought I would share that with you, my friend, as I watch what goes on with humanity.
Yep. This is the direction that we're heading in. So our biggest threat is not outsourcing or insourcing or offshoring. It's automation.
You're right.
That's
corporate greed and the bottom line. And that's why we're here, Nathan.
Yep.
God bless you, my friend.
All right,
we'll carry on the fight as we go on.
All right, talk to you soon. All right, why don't we take our first break, and then we'll get back into our subject. If you all stick with us, we will sit aside of the break here at Living Now.
Do you want to increase your home's value? Do you want to lower your...
Hey, Mr. Hare, make sure you tell them
There's several of them. I'm sure you've seen them as well on the Weather Channel, and I just don't understand why we never see anybody of color in Buffalo giving the weather report. It can't be that difficult. Even if, I even wrote one of the channels. I sent an email, and I made a suggestion. Well, you've got full-time weather people, but maybe when people are on vacation or on the weekend, maybe you can find someone to fill in and just give them some experience on that. So I will be interested in your comments, Mr. Hare. And then when you brought up the old Hangerer store,
right.
I worked there. Now, we're talking a long time ago,
Just
Mr. Hare.
a bit of time, yeah.
I worked there like during vacation time, the holiday time, when I was in high school, wrapping Christmas gifts. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you start wherever you can start just to get some job skills.
Yep.
So, but anyway, I was just wondering what your thoughts would be on the idea of African-American meteorologists in Buffalo.
Thanks.
And I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
All right. Thanks, Mother Doyle. And, of course, that's one of the ways that you can get people into job tracks is you use job shadowing, you use work experience, you use short-term, part-time employment to give people an opportunity to demonstrate that they can do a job and also give the company a chance to feel out whether or not they can get along with, with a person. That's how people should be able to get into companies that they've not been working in the past. But at the end of the day, jobs are controlled by the people that own the companies who make the decisions about who gets hired. And so if you have a shop where they really consciously don't want to have people of color on their TV screens in certain jobs, you're just not going to get a shot. Even though you know that there are oodles of people that have those skills because you see them in the national news broadcast, right? They have a weather station. There's people on all the time on the weather station. You see them on, the various national news broadcasts and so on. You see people of color all the time. So there's no reason for us not to be able to recruit people into our market area except for the preferences of the people that control those jobs, right? I think we have a caller hanging on. Let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller, are you there? Hello, caller, are you there?
Yes.
Hi,
Nate.
Hi, I can hear you now.
You're from the Employment Information Center. I don't want to mention my name. But, it's very important, like my mother taught me a long time ago, to understand other people's languages. Mm-hmm. And like when I was in high school, first year I had to take Latin. Then she says, all these people speaking Spanish, you should know what they're talking about. So I ended up taking about 2 years of Spanish. My son today speaks Spanish fluently. But when you study Spanish, now the guy Todd Santos, that's Hispanic. Mm-hmm. So when you say people of color, Hispanics are considered people of color, right?
Right, yeah.
But he looks like a white boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to I heard Mrs. Doyle, makes a statement. But they have people, he is a person, Hispanic person, Puerto Rican or whatever.
Right, and she didn't mean that there was not ever any. There have been some people of color that have been meteorologists on some of the local stations and whatnot. But they're very few and very far between. In a market area, the point she's making is in Buffalo, you've got roughly a 40% African population, maybe a 10% Hispanic population in the city. So that's like 50% of the city are non-Caucasian people. I mean, people that physically appear to be people of color. And yet you don't see anything remotely resembling that in terms of who is actually speaking to us on our local airways, representing the news and weather on our airways. And that's really the point that she was making. She's not making a particular criticism about this particular station or that particular person, but she's just talking about let's just look at what's happening. And her point was that we've got to do a better job ourselves in growing people in our own community who want to be meteorologists. Everybody can't be a rap star. Everybody can't be the nose guard, for the Cleveland Browns, and so on. Somebody has to be the weatherman, right? And we got to start growing people to be that. It's not going to happen on its own. And I think that's the point she was trying to help us to understand.
Okay. And another thing, I hear people talking about cursive writing isn't necessary. Now, you, as say like an 18-year-old black male or female, fill out an application and it's printed.
Mm-hmm.
And even your signature is really bad. Do you think you're going to get hired? So cursive writing, they should make sure all these children understand cursive writing is important.
It's not only important, cursive writing actually helps you to learn almost in a feeling, a tactile way, how to structure thought in your head, how to code information that you are learning, that you're trying to process, to code it where you file it places in your mind that you can recall that information in a structured way. If you don't have the ability to recall prior experiences in a structured way, all you have left are your feelings. And so that's why when you talk to young people, you ask them a direct question, they shrug their shoulders or they make a face, but they don't really have words to respond to you because they don't have a good grasp of words, number one, and number two, they don't structure their thoughts in a way that they can recall those thoughts, in an online kind of a way. And that really inhibits you when you start talking about jobs that require you being able to think and be able to manipulate a lot of different kinds of information and different kinds of thoughts in a logical, cohesive way. You get hurt with that if you have not developed your mind that way. Cursive writing is really, in my view, important. Do you remember the case with Trayvon Martin, where there was a young woman, her name was Rachel something or other. She was a Haitian child, but she was raised in the Miami area, and she was being interviewed, by a defense attorney in the course of this case, and the guy reads her, or he hands her, this investigation report that was written in cursive by a detective, and she handed it back to him and said, "I can't read that."
Wow,
and,
I remember. I remember that. Yeah.
And she says, "Why?" Or he says, "Why?" She says, I can't read that." He says, "Why? You can't read?" She says, "No, I can't read that. I can't read it in cursive. If it was printed, I'd be fine, right? But if it was in cursive, I couldn't read it." And that was the first time it dawned on me that cursive writing is treated as an optional area of education as opposed to a mandatory. I started to learn cursive writing when I was in the first grade.
Yeah,
How can you
I went
take
to school
this?
31 the old-fashioned way, yes.
Right.
And it really prepared me for, I didn't have a problem after that. And I was lucky. My son was awarded scholarships to, like, private schools like Park School. You got the top whites going there, rich people. But then I tried to get into nursing. They told me I wasn't nursing material. But later on, I was able to tutor one of my nieces from 7th grade at a Catholic school to her second year at Sacred Heart, and in math. She ended up graduating from UB School of Electrical Engineering with her master's. Today, she's in her 13th year, United States Department of Defense. My son, Morehouse School of Medicine. Now my granddaughter is, 24, in her last year of medical school at Morehouse. But yet and still, I wasn't qualified to become a nurse.
Yep.
Okay, good show. I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
All
bye.
Right, bye-bye. And so this up-credentialing situation really cost companies a lot of money. They think that they're protecting their workforces from the onslaught of these others. They look at anybody who's not, I don't want to even characterize it that way. If you're not their view of a standard, normal American, you're considered to be an other, right? And clearly, if they're abusing you, they must not think that you're a normal American. So if you're being abused, guess what you are? You're an other, right? But this process that they have accepted, this manner that they have accepted for screening populations to keep people out of their workforces or from becoming too dominant a population that they have to draw their workforce from, the Center for Economic Research says that this up-credentialing costs the economy something in the area of $160 billion a year. degree inflation also increases employee turnover. They say that while one might argue that college graduates deserve a pay differential compared to non-college graduates, the Harvard Business School found that non-degree holders perform just as well on specific technical needs for particular jobs. Adding a requirement for a degree adds cost, but doesn't seem to have any matching effect on productivity or quality of work. So you're asking for more and more credentials, but you don't get any more productivity out of the person that has the higher credentials, because the higher credential doesn't have anything to do with the work that the person is going to be doing. It doesn't improve their productivity at all. Entry-level employees bear a disproportionate cost of this up-credentialing. According to the Medium Corporation study, its cost at four-year schools have increased by 129% from 1987 to 2017, far more than wages have increased over the course of that same time. So it's becoming more and more costly and taking a bigger percentage of your income for you to be able to support your children's education, and yet the increased education does not increase the children's ability to be able to do the job. This seems to be a nutsy way to do business. We have a caller hanging on. Let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller, are you there?
Oh, yes, Mr. Hare, this is Miss Doyle again.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I just kind of want to clarify what I was talking about. I'm specifically